I'm used to moving home every 1 or 2 years, always being able to pack out my life in 2 suitcases. Um, that's why it feels like for me being able to put down roots and say that I can live here for as long as I want to is even more rewarding. I come from generations of migrations, not always out of choice. I want to stay put. For me, housing co-ops are a way to retain my agency in how and where I end up. It shouldn't be a privilege to have secure and affordable and democratically run housing. It should be everyone's right. And through setting up housing cooperatives, I can channel my anger around land and wealth inequalities into building long-term, affordable housing structures that will outlive me. My name's Sim, I'm 24 years old, and I'm passionate about developing community-led housing alternatives that remains affordable for anyone to access whilst being democratically owned and managed by the people who live in that house. So I live in a housing cooperative called Out of Town in Brighton, and we manage this entirely by ourselves. So we have 2 houses, and together there are 15 of us who live here. A housing co-op is a legal entity that owns the home, and this is entirely managed and governed by the people who live there. But these people can change over time. People can move in and out. Individual members like myself rent from the cooperative, but collectively the 15 of us make up our landlord. In this way, our home is in common ownership and can never be sold off for private gain. We live in a society where the cost of buying your home has risen and risen, but incomes have stayed the same, making it increasingly unaffordable to buy your own home. Housing is a profitable business in the UK, with the value of household land making up over 50% of the UK's economy. Housing is going to remain unaffordable. When you turn a necessity into a financial asset, it just makes housing a tool for the rich to get richer. And when you make something that is a necessity, like food, water, shelter, into something that people can make money from, what you end up doing is making those necessities unavailable for the people who can't afford them. There is a system that is built on using housing as a way of making money. And while that is the case, there is motivation for everyone in this system, policymakers, landlords, industrialists, to hike up house prices. This doesn't have to be the way though, and it wasn't the case just 40 years ago in this country. It's okay for things to be expensive, so long as there is an alternative that is available. For example, people can choose to buy branded washing up liquid for £3, as long as there is also an own brand alternative that you might be able to buy for 50p. That way, there's always going to be the choice for going for the more expensive option. You're not just doing it because you have to. That isn't the case for housing though. You don't have that cheaper alternative. This is why I've been putting energy into setting up housing cooperatives, which are a radical alternative where housing remains not for profit and stays within community ownership rather than private ownership. We need a system of housing provision, not a housing market. Some people are able to get into social housing, but the waiting lists can be years, and this is only increasing as the government reduces the supply of council houses by selling it off through the right to buy. This means that more than ever, people are relying on renting as a way of accessing housing, but renting comes with its own set of challenges. 5 examples. Rents that aren't regulated, not being affordable to people on benefits, vague eviction laws that favour landlords, average tenancies that might just be a year, and uncertainty around having your deposit returned. Another challenge is that you don't have basic control or autonomy with what you're allowed to do in the house. For example, being able to keep pets in your house. But there is a different form of housing that I live in and help set up, and that's called a housing cooperative. I want to see a more democratised ownership of the economy more widely. And for me, this starts at home. For more people to have the security and the autonomy that comes with owning your own home without having to find tens of thousands of pounds to put down a deposit. We're a member of Radical Roots, which is a mutual aid network of people who are members of housing cooperatives or worker cooperatives, where employees own the business. And all of the members come together to build alternatives to the ecological crisis presented by capitalism, and in order to move more of the economy into common ownership. We manage a housing co-op through monthly general meetings with all of our members present. After we've paid off our monthly mortgage payments and our bills, we have the financial autonomy and we can choose where to collectively invest our rents or the money that is left over from our rents. This means that I can do things like put a shelf up in my room, paint my walls. I can dig up the garden to grow things. When something breaks, I can fix it. I don't have to wait for a landlord to give me that permission. And because we're the long-term tenants, we have more of an incentive to make our house better for ourselves. We're currently in the process of remortgaging our house, which we'll use to eco-renovate the house and make it more accessible. Landlords, unfortunately, have an incentive to cut corners because housing is seen as their way to make money. With co-ops, our only incentive is to provide good quality housing for ourselves, and all of our rents get reinvested straight back into the cooperative. But being in a co-op is about more than just the housing. We collectively buy food together and cook for each other. This means that I get to cook for 10 people every 10 days, and every other of that 9 days I have healthy home-cooked food for me. I won't romanticise it because there are issues with it, like in any housing situation, but the emphasis on communication, honesty, respect, it really makes it easier to deal with the day-to-day experience of living with other people. I want to try and highlight the fact that having expensive or overvalued housing doesn't actually mean that the country's economy is doing any better. The bulk of housing prices comes from the land underneath, not the bricks and mortar that make up a house. Banks should be investing in people, industries, green infrastructure, healthcare, creative industries, not investments that are speculative like housing. When I was 18, I was so entrenched in the neoliberal model around us that I could barely conceive of what a different economic system could look like until I came across cooperatives. For me, housing co-ops are a way of realising that the way that housing works in this country doesn't have to be the way that it is. I think that a way of making our financial system more equitable and more fair is for everyday people to embrace different economic approaches and to make them more visible. In this country, 65% of people own the homes that they live in, but this is largely skewed in favour of older, whiter and more middle-class communities. My vision for the future is about creating a more distributed ownership of housing, where people can choose to have more autonomy and control over their homes if they want to. They can choose to pay less in housing costs if they want to. We can share out the work of maintaining a house and developing roots in one place if that is what we want.